meeting. So we are meeting after 16 months of Russian aggression on Ukraine. And in these months, we have observed a great disconnection between the European left, between parts of the European left, and in particular parts of the Italian left, and the Ukrainian left. And the Ukrainian left is in this moment facing two fights, one against the Russian aggression, and one with the neoliberal politics of the Ukrainian state, which mirror under a lot of aspects the neoliberal politics that the rest of Europe faces. And in front of this struggle, and in front of what were pretty clear requests for help and solidarity, as I said, a big chunk of European Italia left opted for silence or when not hostility. And we believe that to be a shame and something that needs to be dealt with. And this and as Sinistra per l'Ukraina, our very small organization, with this meeting, we are trying to create a platform to address this issue. So a place to talk, to listen, and to learn. And with a particular focus for what concerns labor rights and activism. The workers in Kryvyi are not different from the workers in Florence. And what seemed to be clear about the struggle for worker rights and human rights is that it's a struggle that can be fought only with unity, which it's obviously missing, at least at a European level. So this is our purpose. In case you want more of this content, in the invite that we sent you, in the second page, there are both the links of Commons, of Sozialny Rukh, as well as of Sinistra per l'Ukraina. Now, our guests today are Aliona Liasheva. They are all members of Sozialny Rukh and all participate with Common in a way or the other. Aliona Liasheva, sociologist and researcher in political economy. Vladislav Starodubstev, historian with a focus on Central and Eastern Europe. And Arten Tidva, union organizer, involved, I think, in the organization in Kryvyi, as well as a mutual aid organization during the war. So, the format of the meeting, I prepared a series of questions to which our guests will answer in the order they see fit. As they pointed out at the start of this conversation, Sozialny Rukh as a movement brings different positions, bring these different instances, so they will have different answers. And then at the end, we will, around 8 or right before, we will have a question time, and you can already put your questions in the chat, and Maria Elena will collect them. Now, furthermore, I think that's all. We can actually start with you. First, in the order, in whatever order you want, if you want to tell us more about the organizations you are part of and your practices.
Yeah, I can start probably. So my name is Aliona, and I used to live in Italy for some time ago. but it's just a fun fact because I moved to Ukraine like 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and I'm still here. Throughout this year, mostly I've been focused on volunteer kind of activism, because I'm based in Lviv, which, as you might know, is in the western part of the country, and it's relatively safe place. So we were like the point which was receiving a lot of people who were running from the war. We were this hub for humanitarian aid. But of course, and this kind of activism is quite depoliticized because many Ukrainians are now involved in this kind of activism. But for us as the left, it also is important to, through this kind of activism, to build networks, to also, of course, support people with whom we were before probably doing more political work, but to support them either if they're in the army, or either they are now being displaced, or and so on. And I'm apart from being part of a social movement, I'm also editor of a common journal. That's it. I will not take much time.
And Artem or Vladislav?
Okay, I am Vladislav. I'm a member of Sozialny Rukh. In organization, I'm currently head of Kyiv office. I organize different activities and participate in the discussions around reconstruction and so on and so on. By specialty, I am historian, and this profession is really connected with also my activities as a left-wing activist, as a social activist, because my field of study is usually social, trade union, and left movements in the Central Eastern Europe, and especially in Ukraine. So it's something that I have my expertise. This time of the war, I was one of the people who were responsible for organizing from nothing our international contacts and setting up campaign against cancellation of Ukraine's debt. So, yeah.
Artem, okay.
Hello, I'm Artem. I'm a member of executive body of social movement. I'm responsible for development of contacts with trade union movement. I see the future of trade union movement as a democratic and horizontal movement with leftists. And I see the future of leftists as a massive organization with workers' unions. Since the war started, I started to collect contacts of different trade unions with whom I cooperated with in past, and we tried to organize networks for internal displaced people to flee from frontline to relatively peacefully cities like my own, where I grew up in Khmelnytsky city. It's central western part of Ukraine, and we organized in trade union house, in trade union training center. We organized hundreds of places for people to stay. Most of them were trade union members and their families, but not only. So there were a lot of other people from Mariupol, Mykolaiv, Kherson, Kharkiv, and some people from Kyiv. So it's part of our activity. Also, we organized during the war started. We organized a network of support of people who face it with labor rights violation during war. We calling it labor defense. It is a kind of chatbot in Telegram where we collect all information about workers' rights violations, and a lot of people wrote to us. We're trying to promote this because a lot of people think that during wartime there are no labor rights, which is not true. And also a lot of people think that during wartime there are no rights for public gathering, for protests, but we see that delivery service workers, nurses, and other workers' organizations, students protests are exist during wartime, and no one going to the jail after this. So it's possible all the time.
So I think we would like to know more, and this can be a question to Artem, but then I'm sure Alona and possibly also Vladislav, you have your own perspective on the topic. But so in the transition from pre-war activism and post-war activism, including, including, for example, volunteering, assistance to refugees, as well as the transition to labor rights struggle. Okay, no problem. Including labor rights struggle. What? So is how much? How does the change work? Meaning, I assume you end up interacting with more people and with realities that you might not be you might have not been interacting with beforehand. For example, you mentioned the army. I'm not sure how much the army was a concern back in 2013. So yeah, I would like if you want, if you can expand on this change and how people react to it.
About army, I can start from this. Maybe Alona and Vladislav will add also something later. I think that until full-scale invasion, I was one of the pacifists and inside of our organization of those people who thought that peaceful reintegration of Donbass is possible, and sometime we tried to hear some rational ideas from the from not controlled part of Ukraine, but from some people who call themselves leftists and says that something about like separatism is also right of people and so on and so on. Yeah, but since full-scale invasion, a lot of things became more clear for us, like narratives which some people from Russian side trying to repeat all the time became more clearly for us. Cooperation of those people from uncontrolled territories of Ukraine, their cooperation with Kremlin became like direct, and everyone knew that all their activities of last years was not demand of autonomy for people. It was just whitewashing, or I can say left washing, of authoritarian Putin regime, which prohibited for all these years workers' demonstrations, trade union activity on the uncontrolled territories of Ukraine. And I think the last mention of ILO reports you might get, it's 2016. It was last attempt of public protest of miners around Donetsk region, which were stopped by people with rifles. Since the full-scale invasion started, some of our friends who were also pacifist like I am, and some other people, they joined to military recruitment center and joined armed forces of Ukraine. Some of them already fled from Crimea since annexation. Some of them, as one of editor of Commons Journal and also member of our executive body, Taras, he's from Lugansk region originally, so he fled to Kiev because Russian captured Lugansk 8-9 years ago, and this time he decided to not flee anymore but to join military. And we have a lot of stories of people like them, our friends from Crimea who fled to Kiev and then fled to Lviv and joined armed forces. Some our friends from punk street movements who were always against war, and when their kind of island of anarchy, which we call sometimes Ukraine, because lack of police intervention into some far right or far left activities, and because of possibility to protect participants of our movement, of our left movement against some persecution. So we call it a small island of anarchy. So some people, anarchists, came to military forces of Ukraine to stop Russian fascist intervention. What else can we add here? It's difficult to say that I found new contacts of some other people, but it's better to say that we collected old contacts, like some people who were in left movement 10 years ago, and we knew that they joined some voluntary activities and or joined military. We asked if they need some support from people who are not in military but can support them in other ways if they need something.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can probably add on this topic. Or Alona. Okay, let's. I would say that we as the left really started to exist as Ukrainian left only after the full-scale invasion. Before this, we were something like a circle of Western left in Ukraine. We weren't as connected to the situation and the reality of war, of Russian imperialism, that all of the people on the Western left also. The situation was that while some apolitical activists, social activists agitated for building new ammunition plants, we as the left, we just had this issue of war as some kind of taboo, and we didn't discuss it properly, and so on and so on. We were afraid to see and speak, and it was extremely controversial between us. It was, I would say, the topic that there were a lot of influence of Western thinkers who was writing about self-determination of the Donbass and whatever, a lot of left-wing dogmatism, and all of this really made really hard for left-wing in Ukraine to develop, to understand the situation and to think for itself. And I would say that the situation shown that while we were speaking more in intellectual circles, the right actually was right when it was preparing for the war and agitating for militarization and all of that stuff. And we were partially blind to the situation when Russia bombed Chechnya, continued in Georgia, and then before that there weren't any continuity in such imperialisms, that in this situation there could be some peaceful reintegration or some UN actions and it will solve it. And we had a lot of confusion on the situation, but the full-scale invasion, it was something that immediately connected everyone to the reality, from any like political spectrum in Ukraine, from any political traditions, and I would say it's actually make us in some way to rethink a lot of leftist dogmas, a lot of typical way of thinking about pacifism, about the war, about popular mobilization, and to return to texts of people like Fanon, and to start to speak about national liberation and all of that stuff. And actually, it is in some way driven all of the world left to rethink itself and to adapt to the situation, to what's going on, and try to actually connect with the reality. And I think it's very interesting that Ukrainian movement that itself was very confused and was very influenced by the West, by the Western left discussions. Now it's kind of in vanguard to new approaches to the left. And yeah, there's a situation. Now the army in Ukraine is like the most respected group of people, and we all have friends there. We all have activists, labor activists, our activists, our parts of our families, our loved ones who are fighting or who are in danger, and it's not something that we can speak as like from apart. Just treating this as like like a people's war, because it couldn't be treated otherwise right now. So the question of militarization in this part, it's kind of in Ukraine, it's a non-question. It's a question of what helps us to survive and what isn't. It's just like that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I just really wanted to add on something which is often not seen that much, even in Ukraine, of how important for the army to exist. That the army has a very strong support of volunteer movement, and of course, in any kind of crisis situation, in any kind of country, there is like like initial reaction of some sort of response. And that's what also happened in Ukraine, that when the invasion started, a lot of people started volunteering, a lot of people started to help the army, to help civilians. But I think what helped us to go on with this, of course, we're all super tired. We live like day by day, sometimes like forgetting about what is a day off, what is vacation. But as we used to have for years and years, like activist networks of the left, feminist networks, networks between trade unions, we grew them throughout this time. And thanks to this, because of this like network, left-wing feminist groups, trade unions, they managed to go on with this kind of support. But of course it's tiring. Of course it's like at the same time, while you're, launching a lot of these volunteer like projects, which you actually doing just to survive. I mean, I can give you an example of our trade union of the medical workers, which is more like concentrated in Lviv, is that throughout the year, apart from like registering new trade unions and being involved in labor conflicts and defending their rights, they also had to bring their comrades from Izum, which was under occupation, from Kherson, which was under occupation, and then after occupation, these places, they become pre-frontline territories. And now, after the explosion of the Kakhovka electro station, there are like more needs, and you basically live in a situation that you need to help the people with whom you were before, like doing some activism. So it's like, but at the same time, as you have these activist networks, it's a bit easier to go on in this like survival mode for a longer time. Yeah, and we don't know how long it could last. Like probably at some point people like all will get just super exhausted, but still as these networks are being formed, they're super strong, because now it would be easier to organize, you know, like a protest of like medical workers, because they basically survived death and life situations.
I see. Thank you. Then I connect directly to what Vladislav said when he mentioned the transition toward, now we debate concepts such as national liberation, which were earlier on contrary to leftist dogma, so to speak. And this is a debate that is in a very niche form, opened also in Italy. And one of the things that came out is that it shouldn't be contrary to leftist dogma. You find in Marxist literature, the idea of the liberation of the nation is an idea of the liberation of the proletarian against the imperialist yoke. Even in anarchist literature, you find the idea of the nation as people which, when attacked with weapons, need to be defended, and that doesn't equate to defending whatever form of state. So I understand how, I don't understand in the way you do, but it's clear that there is that there are some aspects of leftism which have been completely ignored by the European left for a number of reasons that are beyond the point of our discussion.